8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and lift off.
Coach on Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, welcome again to another edition of your Journey to Success podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Weiss. I'm a life coach, speaker, and author based here in Phoenix. The goal here each week is to create really a movement of people who are passionate about getting real information to move out of something I call the worst day cycle. All of us have suffered some sort of tough day or tough life experience that is getting in our way because, quite honestly, we just don't talk about or deal with things like that. And it creates something I call the worst day cycle. It's a human condition. Nobody's immune from it. It's how we all live our lives, every single one of us. And the way that cycle operates in our life is what's keeping us choosing poor relationships, poor careers, whatever it is that we aren't achieving as a result of this cycle. I describe that process and I give you a roadmap on how to overcome it. It's not just cheesy buzzwords. It's actually a plan of how to get through that. It's called Your Journey to Success, just like the name of the show, and it's available on all formats on Amazon. And this week I decided to do something a little bit different. So those of you watching on Facebook, if you want to join in, I'm solo today. If you have questions or anything or comments, by all means interact. What I wanted to touch on with all the discord and politics and social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, everyone's fighting all over the place. And, you know, the whole goal of a lot of the social media stuff was to create community. But it's actually, studies have shown repeatedly, it's done the exact opposite. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what a community is and how do we create one. And there was a landmark study done by Harvard. It started in, I think it was the late 1920s or early 1930s. They grabbed over 70 people and from all different backgrounds, you know, wealthy, poor, you know, students that were at Harvard. Hey, good morning, Rick and Mark. Just see you there. Sorry, normally I type in responses, but thanks for watching, you guys. If you have questions, by all means, pop in. I'd be happy to answer any. They did a landmark study where they followed 70 different people throughout their lives. Like this study, it's the longest study of its kind. It's still going. And what they found was the people with the most success, whether that's personally or professionally in their life, the most happiness, are those that were part of a community, those that stayed in touch with people. And that's one of the difficulties with social media, that while we have all these friends, we're not sitting across from them. It's distant and text message, email. There's actually no emotional interaction, really, because something you have to realize with communication, less than 7% of all communication is words. So what that means is if you're primarily texting somebody, hey, Denise, how are you? If you're primarily texting or emailing, especially your spouse, your friends, whatever, you're not connecting with them because 93% of all communication is body language. It's tone, it's inflection. That's part of why you see so many fights on social media. People read the words and based on their own emotional content for the day, they respond. So lots of things get misunderstood, twisted out of place. And then what you have is you see this with celebrities. Now, I'm not saying every celebrity or somebody who's done something wrong is off the hook, but a lot of times they make a verbal comment on social media. And then another person sitting in another part of the country takes those words, misconstrues them and says, you're a racist, you're this, you're that. Well, because this person wasn't able to use really communication, their body language, their eyes. I mean, look at me, for those of you watching, on Facebook, look at it. You're watching my face. You're watching my smile. that you're interacting with that, you're not paying attention to the words. What you're discerning is my intent through my tone and all of that. It's creating an emotional response in you. You either like it or you don't like it. Well, we miss that in in text and everything. So that's one of the biggest things we have to realize is if you want a community, you have to let go of your phones. But see, there's a reason we all hide behind our phones and we don't do that. Think about it. It's safe. Because here's something I like to talk about, or an example I like to use. Have you ever had a haircut? Or would you let me cut your hair? I'll say this in a speech all the time. Would you let me cut your hair? People are like, look at me. Well, have you had any training? I'm like, I'm 52 years old. I've been watching my hair get cut for years. I think I have a pretty good idea. You know, you kind of grab it by the fingers and use the scissors. And they're like, but you haven't taken a class? And I'm like, well, no. And I'll say, but what if I told you everyone in my family was hairdressers, cousins, uncles, everybody, that I lived in a barbershop, that I spent my whole life watching people how to do this? Would that change? Would you make me, give me permission to cut your hair? And they're like, no way. I'm like, why not? I'm like, well, you need to take a class. You need a license. And then I turn to him, I say, isn't that fascinating? Your hair, something that no matter how badly I butcher it, will grow back perfectly on its own. You want me to take a class. You want me to get a license. But your heart, the essence of who you are in a relationship, you don't expect me to know anything. In fact, when we go on a date, what do? We walk in and we go, look, here's my heart. I know you know nothing about it, and I know nothing about how to nurture it or take care of it either. But if anything happens, it's your fault. You screwed up, not me. That's basically what we do on a date. None of us have been taught how to have a relationship. None of us have been taught how to be a parent. So all of us have gone through adverse experiences growing up. We've all been hurt by our parents. I love people say, oh no, childhood was great. It was beaver cleaver. How could it be? It's impossible. It'd be like me sitting in the barbershop going, well, I've been watching my parents and they watch theirs, so I know what to do. No, we don't. We have no clue how to have a relationship, how to be a parent, how to share our emotions, not because we're bad or incapable. We don't have the information. We haven't gotten the license on how to do it. And that's one of the reasons we now gravitate to social media, because we don't have those skills. We don't know how to connect to people. We don't realize that when somebody makes a slanderous comment about us, they're not talking about us. That's something called denial. Here's a little trick to think about as you navigate social media and you read those horrible comments or you have one thrown your way. If there's any emotion tied to the comment, anything emotional at all, you're a blank, 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 right? Those are emotional words. All they've done is tell you about themselves. What they've done is they've told you exactly how they feel about themselves emotionally. That's how denial works. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world? Couldn't we create a much better community if we knew, say on both sides of the political spectrum, I don't care which side you believe in, if you're a Hillary fan, if you're a Trump fan, when someone attacks your candidate and goes, they're such a racist, they're such a, with Clinton, she's killed people, she's stolen money. With Trump, he's a racist, he's a monger, all these things. What they're actually doing is talking about themselves, okay? So they're not talking about the candidate because it's an emotional content. And so what that means, I'll give you an example, or I'll tie this in a little bit. This is what gets confusing for people because people go, well, I don't do that in my life, but here's how denial works. It's not always direct. In other words, you'll hear this all the time. Pot's now really become socially acceptable, whereas when I was younger, it wasn't. And so a lot of people say, people that smoke pot are like, oh my God, I hate cigarette smokers. They're disgusting. can't stand the smell. It's just awful. They're awful people. Well, smoking pot is just as bad for you as smoking cigarettes. Actually, the content is actually worse. So what they're talking about is a part of themselves where they haven't accepted that they smoke pot. And so they're projecting that, well, what's the right word? That dissatisfaction with their inability to walk in their own morals and values onto somebody else. So the first thing to realize about community and to realize about the social media game and what a struggle it is we're not hearing people because we can't really see what they're communicating. We can't hear what they're communicating. We're misunderstanding almost all of it. And then we're ascribing our own hurts, our own denial, our own emotional triggers back onto them. So think about that. One of the best ways to overcome this, it's simple. Ask questions. So somebody makes some outlandish statement, and instead of firing back with, you're a blank, 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 get to know them. So why do you think that? What makes you say that? Now, here's the difference. What you're going to realize is somebody who sat and thought versus somebody who's hurting emotionally. If they respond back with just emotionally charged rhetoric, in other words, well, they're such dirtbags, those Democrats or whatever it is. They're such blank, 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 blank. I could never associate with them. Okay, there's no reason to get in a fight with them because all they're trying to do is dump their emotional hurt. They just want to be heard. So I know when somebody does that online or to me personally, I don't take it personal. They're not talking to me. They're talking about themselves. So my response becomes, tell me more. What's going on? What are you feeling about that? What this person wants is they truly want community. They want to communicate, but now remember, none of us have been taught how. We don't teach any of this stuff, so we don't know how to generate it in ourselves. So recognize they haven't been taught. They're doing the best they can. Right now, they're in an emotional, sensitive place. When you recognize that, then you can respond with empathy. So the one thing I always look for, is there anything in there that's anger? Anything angry at all? Anger at any form, in any form and at any time is always a mask for fear. So if this person is angry, they are scared to death. And fear is one of three things. It's either the fear of rejection, the fear of inadequacy, or the fear of powerlessness. Let's stay on the political theme. 9 years ago now, it was the Republicans all over Obama. He's a this, he's not a citizen. What were they feeling? Rejected. They just lost. They feel less than. More than 50% of the country in their eyes said, you're wrong. Your beliefs are bad. That's how they're feeling. They're feeling tremendously scarred as a person in their self-worth. They're feeling inadequate. They don't have the skills, tools, or knowledge to change the situation, and definitely powerless. Those are the three things with fear. If you're ever in fear, that's what you want to ask yourself. Where do I feel rejected? Where do I feel inadequate? In other words, where don't I have the skills, tools, or knowledge to fix this situation? And where do I feel powerless? So a lack of control. Powerlessness also has to do with us doing things outside of our morals and values, our needs and wants. I mentioned that earlier with the pot smokers. They have it deep inside. They still have shame around smoking pot. And so instead of facing that, because they're not bad people, they just haven't been taught, they project it onto somebody else. So when we go against our morals and values, we feel powerless, okay? Because we're doing it to ourselves. We're actually victimizing ourselves. The other way that powerlessness comes up is we give ourselves away. In other words, we agree to things that don't work for us. I see this all the time. People are nice. I can't say no. I have to be nice. It's kind to say nice. And then what happens later? I did A, B, C, and D for Judy, and she won't even do X. What that tells you is they did things for this person to try and manipulate them. They wanted something from them. They didn't get it. So they went against their morals and values, and now they're upset about it. They have resentment. What they should have said was no. It makes them feel, most people